Welcome to Isn't It Obvious, where things are obvious. That's going to be the intro.
That's gonna be the intro forever now.
Right.
No, I think you were just slow.
I clapped before you, though.
In your space-time continuum.
But my space-time is the only true space-time, because it's the only one I experience, Sarah.
I mean, true for you.
Exactly, and my truth is infallible.
Okay.
God, how do we start these again? It's been too long.
Do-do-do-do-do-do.
That's not it. That is not.
Jiggy with it.
I know. Sorry, it's
It's too late.
there's more doots or different doots. I'm
They're
sure.
different dudes.
I just
No,
no.
it-
It's yeah. There it is. That's
Yeah,
the
who
one.
uses Morse code anymore? Anyway, hi, welcome to Isn't It Obvious? I'm your host, Micah, with Sera and Phil, and my topic today, isn't it obvious everyone should learn Morse code? That is not my topic. No one should learn Morse code. It is a defunct, anglicized...
No,
English
you never
phrase.
know, man. You never know when you're gonna be trapped by a foreign power and have to blink. Like, please help me, save me. I'm being tortured.
No, it was just torture.
Yeah, it was torture or whatever. I can't remember.
Or
what it
you
was.
could take that story of real life and pull a Ben Shapiro and have it where his main character, Brent Hawthorne, is Morrising out in a torture video. The terrorist is at this longitude and latitude, and
Oh,
typing all of that out with his
Wow.
eyes in Morse code and
Um,
not being discovered.
That's like
Because he's Brent Hawthorne. And Ben Shapiro doesn't know how to write a fucking book. Anyway, to the real topic.
Truth.
Involving writing, video games should be given more respect, and in a course of that, be taught as part of curriculum in academia, and not just at like college level, but throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school.
How do you mean? Like, what kind of class would you be putting this as?
English, history, science. There's myriad video games that can cross over in all of these subjects.
So, are you saying that you want to include video games as a tool for teaching a subject?
No. Well, yes, but having it be part of a thing that everyone has to experience. You have shared experience of this digital means of education.
Because
Not necessarily just the gamification of education, but using actual for entertainment video games as an educational tool.
Wait.
Like how to write a long story as Hideo Kojima and how insane Metal Gear Solid gets.
like film studies was for college. We're talking about like video game studies.
Yes, but incorporating it at a younger age to
Okay.
facilitate the educational options that video games
so
have.
so there's two things then you're saying. There's one, using video games as a tool in other subjects as a tool to help teach or facilitate, that knowledge. Or there's video game studies as its own subject, and it's all just
No, it already is its own subject. There are
I know, but
collegiate
like
programs.
as
I'm saying as
but
part of standard K through 12.
yes, that's what I'm saying. Is
Yeah.
is you're putting that video game studies as its own subject
No.
in. Just let
You-
me fucking finish, please.
4 minutes in, gentlemen.
As video game studies as its own subject in K through 12. Okay, then please clarify. So just as a tool then. We're not studying the video games or the creation of video games. It is literally just using a game as a tool.
No. using various video games in their applicable areas throughout normal K through 12 education. Yes. Yeah, so instead of reading Hamlet or Romeo and Juliet, you play, I don't know, GTA 3. There's a pretty compelling narrative in there that really went through a whole bunch of
I'm not sure though, like if you could really replace concrete literature and books though with video games. I feel like
why not?
You couldn't replace it, but you could use it as like an addition, maybe. I wouldn't use it necessarily for literature, though. Or
Well,
at
if you're
least that
looking for
wouldn't be-
story structure, you're
Well-
given, like, most video games have a very intricate story structure that is given to the player as they play, though it is interactive, so you understand more of the minutia around what is happening. When you're playing Ghost of Tsushima, you are understanding the decimation that the Mongols are bringing to the small island, in their attempts to invade Japan. And you see that viscerally.
I think that's more of a creative writing sort of subject, not really literature. Because in a literature class, you're not writing a story or studying necessarily the structure of a story. You might look at that, but not. It's not. I wouldn't say that's really that class. If you're talking about story creation, that's more like creative writing class or something like that.
So you're saying Assassin's Creed can't be used in history class?
Correct. But you could
Good, I
probably
would never suggest that.
But you could probably make you could make a game that would, go through like something you could play as a well, God, I don't know. Like, would it have to be like as a class you'd play, or would it be like homework that you would just play on your own and you try to get through and you
More
yeah, I
so
don't know.
homework, I would think, for this
I don't know how you
certain
do
mental
that.
exercise.
I think Civilization would be a good game.
Yeah, but then like what would the homework structure be? Like, okay, you play the game and then what do you do with that then? Do you like have a presentation about it? Like, here's the choices you made and why, and what it, like why you made that choice and like how it compares to what another civilization in the actual past did? Like, would you do that maybe?
If everyone had the same seed, so everyone played the same game, yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't. It'd be an interesting exercise in critical thinking and,
Yeah, but it
cost-benefit
wouldn't teach you
analysis.
it wouldn't necessarily teach you history. It might if you had to like compare it or you had to make a choice. But
Yeah,
how
but the
do you
one takeaway
do
from
it?
Civilization is that Gandhi is a nuclear monster that lives forever.
But really, you're not learning. Well, I mean, you might be learning history, but you're also learning, uh, like different choices, like or like different possibilities. So like you're kind of confusing history then potentially, which might not be great for everyone.
Well, based on the average education of history in the K through 12 student today, that's not that different.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, I think history only really mattered after the 19th century. Okay, that's not fair. I One of the things I also wanted to talk about was Kerbal Space Program was like that's gonna be
Good physics
that's
game.
a really good physics game. Like orbital mechanics and just basic Newtonian mechanics. It does pretty good. Like it does a good job in really simulating what you could expect to get out to escape velocity. So I think that's actually pretty decent. I think there
I
are
mean,
games like Telltale Games. I think that company bankrupt, but they made The Walking Dead, right?
morally,
And but one of the things that they talked about was like if you made this decision, it shows how many other people made that decision as well, right?
hmm
That's interesting.
So
yeah.
like I suppose you could take that element too for their classmates or that grade of that year, how many people made that decision, and studies about like maybe what Caesar and what he had to do to get from what like 50 BC and his actions to eventually get stabbed in the back, like that
And the front and the sides.
stab just like a pincushion.
Yep, yeah.
Like the stuff that he did militarily wise was kind of like interesting. It's not really explained other than like, oh, he had a lot of victories and that was it. Like, I suppose if you could make that into a game, that would be more compelling.
Rome, Total
Hmm.
War.
But I mean, the thing though that really kind of makes it hard to replace. I'm not sure how I could explain it. Like, what is the point of literature and history? Is it so that the children could get a context of what happened? And like, if you're talking about battle tactics or why it was important that Bismarck was sunk and stuff like that, like those are they seem to be too into the weeds, right? Like, so I'm not really sure. Again, like, I think for physics and for like calculus and for things like that, where you can see it, you know, in very easy change in motion. I remember in my class for differential equations, like it starts to become very like fun once you can actually attach springs and dampeners and other things together to see how the system works. That I think is actually more applicable for gamification. But things like literature and history and like I don't know, creative writing. I mean,
I think it muddies it.
yeah,
How so?
I it you're
How is going through a narrative style game any different than reading a Shakespeare play or To Kill a Mockingbird or whatever standard is in K through 12 today?
well, I guess that would just be the literature itself. Like that's what you're studying. the literature, like not a game of the literature, or like you could maybe, but I don't see. I don't
Again,
know
I'm
how
not
you would-
saying changing curriculum to make games out of what normal curriculum is. I'm saying incorporating video games as they
Yeah, but
are
like
as a
I don't
money-making thing
know.
into curriculum.
I don't know how you would like, or I guess I don't see like how you could make a fun game. I'm sure someone could figure it out, maybe, but I guess I could see you could make a fun game for math, and they have like a bunch of small little mini games and stuff for like math and sciencey stuff. Like I played, God, what was it? There was this geology eyewitness computer game that I played as a kid. Those were fun. Like those learning games are fun. But I guess I don't see like how you would make a game work for those subjects. Because like for history, you can kind of learn what happened when. But if you're how do you make that a game, and how do you like how are you learning history from that game? I guess is what I'm trying to understand.
Again, it's not making new games to fit the curriculum, it's using current games. Like, in terms of literature, comparing the narrative styles of Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6.
Well, that wouldn't be literature then. That would be
It's
like
stories.
no, that would be its own separate class. Like that would be the literature of video games then.
And how is literature of video games different than literature of novels? You are still telling a
One's
concise story,
yeah, but
just
one's
one is interactive.
yeah,
Slightly. You're still on rails. You can't deviate off of that.
yeah, illusion
You
of
are going to
choice.
walk through Raccoon City.
But
You are
it's
going to shoot zombies.
but it is a different type of storytelling. Like it is. It's an interactive storytelling. It's not literature. I mean, there is literature elements, but it's not the same subject.
I mean, I think that's what film studies is, though, but that's like a college course, right? Where you examine a movie and then you write about it, right? And you critique it against the other movies around its time.
Yeah, this would be examine that you would be comparing two narrative styles of different
Right.
games. That would be its own separate course. It wouldn't necessarily be.
But I think that there's a problem of staleness when it comes to. I mean, I'm thinking just like changing my gears a little bit, like the gamification of something like concert band. Like I really didn't like playing
Yeah.
Philip Sousa songs, right? Like these are just very. I don't know why we play them. Like I don't think anyone finds them particularly rousing. But yet we do because I guess it's just a thing. And the same for me. Like as a kid, like classical music, I always thought was very hit or miss, right? Like, but I did like songs that were a bit more contemporary. But again, I would always love to play like the Halo theme, right? I think that's a great song, just from a musical like composition, or any of the Final Fantasy series. But like, if you sit down and you're trying to teach a kid how to play the guitar or the piano or something, and you're like, okay, I want you to learn Mozart and Mendelssohn and Beethoven. It's like, okay, I mean, yeah, they're good because classically speaking, but like as a kid, I would be way more interested in learning Dire Dire Docks from Mario 64, right? And so there is an interest barrier, but nope, no, we have to play these really stale songs from Bach. Well, he's a genius. That's why it's like I don't give a like I just don't have the interest for that. I understand that like perhaps structurally there's something there, but if you really want to get a kid hooked onto something, that's kind of where I think that it should be aligned to what today's kids like, right? Like dance classes, they don't teach ballroom dancing, right? Like they would. I think we talked about this in a previous podcast, but like you would hope that they would modernize it to the taste that are to the kids like today. So I think when it comes to adding more games, at least for me, that makes sense. Literature, though, I always thought that was odd to have. Again, I'm not a liberal arts person, but I always thought it was odd anyway that we had to review the arts, like the work of Canterbury Tales and Shakespeare and some of the stuff. And people are like, oh, it's very important. And I'm like, I guess, but like, if that's important, then why isn't film important? All film is maybe lazy, that's why. And I'm like, film has a lot more utility to be right now, right? To discuss films with other people than
and it
just
also
literature.
like, and to be frank, if you're the important in quotes part of reading those old classics or whatever, are they had like messages, or there was something unique about it that that inspired other people, and it continued. Like there is a lesson there, or morals, or something there that you're learning, right? You can find that in today's contemporary literature. Like you can find that in films even, and that's why there are separate classes. I don't know why, like I don't know why we continue to read the same old, but I guess it's because that's what curriculums have always been based around, and it's just easier to pick something that old people know.
So
they
we
can
only care about like
so
the
they can
firsts,
so they can
because there wasn't really an author before Chaucer
well no
in terms
because
of someone who wrote their name to fiction and was famous for it.
it's because their teachers are lazy and they aren't paid enough. So so they don't want to build a whole new curriculum around new pieces of literature that have just as important messages, is my guess.
It's so like the funny part is that I feel like, Micah, you're 100% right, because we can think of examples right off the bat where you can make a game, or you can use a game right now for all the other subjects that I find that there's like an auxiliary component to. Like I mentioned before, people are interested in playing video games. Why don't we have an element of that in this subject? It falls apart quickly in things that I just didn't understand to begin with. Like imagine playing kind of like a civics game while you're taking civics and government classes in high school.
Like democracy,
Like
where you run a democracy and you have to try and run an active campaign and you can try different
yeah,
things. And that's not an educational game. That is a weird resource management game.
that explains to me a lot more about incentives of why people would throw a bone on things that have no monetary influence but a cultural influence, and why those wedge issues are so pressed. Like,
That's more almost a poli-sci
but
thing.
I mean, we
But wouldn't that be better in civics instead of asking a bunch of 15-year-olds to what would be the next amendment to the US Constitution you'd make? When 90% of them would be like, we need to lower the drinking age to 18 again. Because they all argue if you can fight and die for your country, you should be able to have a beer.
I mean, yes, I think so. Right.
I think that would be better served, yes. In that, if that's the project your teacher is going to give you, then yes, I think the game would be better.
It was 20 fucking years ago, and I'm still pissed to this day that nobody could come up with something any iota better
Yeah.
than we just want to drink at 18.
I agree. I remember taking a civics class in my senior year, and they were saying something like, okay, well, what do you think about these Federalist Papers? And even at that age, I was like, why do I give a shit about these people from a long time ago? And they're like,
Newsfest.
well, because they're the founders of this government. It's like, well, they ain't around here now. And they're like, well, what do you think if they were here today? What would you think they would say? And I'm like, good.
I think they'd be insulted because the 3/5 compromise didn't hold.
I was gonna be like, yeah,
They'd probably be upset about a lot of changes we've made. They'd be
What?
like,
Women can vote? We didn't
Yeah.
write that in there. What the hell's wrong with you guys? Did you not look at what we wrote? It was just white landowners only. What is to be misunderstood here?
That's kind of my argument. It's like, why do I give a shit about what these people think? They're basically assholes, right? Like on purpose.
Yep.
And and then my joke was to that teacher. It's like they would be like, "What is this illuminating device? Where is the kerosene oil? Is it comes from whale or from sheep blubber?" Like it just, I made that joke, and they're like, "I'm not amused face," but still, I'm thinking like, why are we talking about what old super ancient things are when we could talk about things like
because teachers are lazy and don't want to build a whole new curriculum around contemporary things every 5 years. They want to just use and reuse the same shit.
So
over.
I agree that like there are a lot of like games right now because there's so many indie ones that you could probably fit the bill that makes it more interesting, but also makes it more like real. Like how the government really works isn't just a series of checks and balances, but of corruption and greasing people's palms. No, but the thing it falls apart is exactly where we stumbled upon. Like the first question is like, I don't understand literature. Like I just don't get it. Like I am just too stupid to understand. Like why do we have these classes? I guess. Oh, it's because you need to understand how to read. It's like, oh,
Partly, but you're also there's
Well, it's critical thinking is a lot of education, and a lot of education that falls under liberal arts is trying to educate a kid in how to look at a piece of art or a speech or something and look at it critically and analyze it and dissect what's going on.
Yeah, see what the message is. Maybe what
And-
the like the art of it is.
Yeah, the intended and like the obvious and the subtle
Yeah.
communication that the author has, I think, is translated better in a video game system. Like, there's an indie game out of a Taiwanese developer that is a horror game, but it's based on like post World War II, essentially like McCarthyism that happened in Taiwan,
See.
where anyone that was accused of not being a communist, so I guess inverse McCarthyism, was like ratted out to the authorities, and how that terrorized generations.
I feel like that you could use that as well, but I do think there is a different type of. I mean, it's very. I feel like you could do both, like because I would learn better from a book, as far as like reading a story goes. I would prefer a book over a video game, but I do think you could certainly use a video game in the same way.
Well, you also have to imagine yourself that you're an impressionable kid in this day and age where you've had a touch screen as your means of entertainment your entire life. And you are far more familiar at a young age with the digital medium, the digital world we're living in.
Yeah, but
The
I don't want to like me as a person. I don't personally want to play these like not really fun video games. Like they're depressing. They're like if we're talking about like horror video games, I don't want to play those. I don't want to play like I don't want to play sport video. Like I want to just play my Stardew Valley. I want to play my little farming game and not have any
Can you find any educational qualities in Stardew Valley?
math maybe and patience. But
What?
like
Not agriculture? Not, I'm trying to plant potatoes in the middle of the summer and they aren't growing.
well you I mean
Sorry,
I
bad
guess
example. Potatoes grow anywhere under any condition. So
well, I was gonna say you plant potatoes in the spring in Stardew, but regardless, so yeah, you learn a little bit, like the very very like like basic, like you might learn like when to plant certain crops or whatever, but like it's not.
Stardew was made by one man. It's not that
But yeah,
complex
but
of a
like,
game.
but I'm not looking like I don't want to play a complex game. Like I'd rather read a book. Like I don't want to. I personally would not find that as fun of a learning tool. But I do
Answer me
see where
this:
it could
not
be.
as you or specifically experiencing it. Do you think there is merit in it as
Yes.
an exercise?
Yes. So I think you could. Yes, I think you could use games as a teaching tool. Me personally, it would not be necessarily for me, but it would probably reach a lot of kids, especially in this day and age, better perhaps than a book or a textbook.
I'm taking that as
I
a win.
think you. I
So
think you're.
I'm good.
Do you feel good? Do you feel good?
No, not really. I'm just bummed I couldn't talk about orgies.
Oh God,
I am not bummed.
I'm not either.
I don't want to be bummed. No, I am gonna go ahead and one last thing is that I don't really know why we have a disdain towards video games still. Like I think that was the other element to
Well,
your
it's like how we
question.
have how people like in literature have a disdain towards fantasy and science fiction. And I'm like, no, no, like fantasy is the backbone of all literature. It is.
But your comment in the beginning was like video games should be given more respect, right? As well,
And they
right?
should be.
And the answer to that is like I don't really think for whatever reason video games are still kind of looked at as like a child's toy, right?
And that is the crux of this, as they are not a child's toy anymore, but they can be used for things that are more serious and more impactful and more legitimate.
They do teach critical thinking.
I'm not sure if they. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what teaches critical thinking. In school, it's kind of funny because you think that maybe experiments might teach critical thinking, right? Like, okay, well, I want to be able to set something up and see what happens, right? So I'm going to set up a hypothesis, and then I'm going to try to, reject the null hypothesis or something. But in school, that doesn't work at all because everything is on rails. You're supposed to set up this experiment, and this is your result. You already know this because you had a lecture about this already. It's not really an experiment as it is just being in some sort of weird train tracks.
Yeah, you're going through the motions of
Well,
someone else's.
I ring the bell and you drool.
Right.
So now you're going to ring your own bell, and now you're going to drool because we've already established that ringing the bell means you drool.
And,
it's Pavlovian.
It has nothing to do with real experimenting in the sense of non-orgy stuff. And the second one is, when it comes to like the literature side of it, I don't. So video games don't really have a lot of respect, and even in literature, fantasy and the sort of nonfiction stuff don't really get a lot of respect, especially science fiction stuff.
Unless it's Shakespeare.
Unless it's Shakespeare for some weird reason.
For some fucking reason, he's the almighty of the English language.
Or let's be honest, the Bible.
I remember I had to do a book on.
I mean, the Bible's a lot of history too.
I think it was
same thing with like the Quran.
Yeah, actually, like
it was initially written as a historical text that they just put a whole bunch of theology in.
I think studying theology in a video game sense would be really critical, super critical.
Yeah.
Dante's Inferno. Finally, that game will get its day. That's a horrible God of War ripoff. And God of War! You have mythology right there in between sex minigames.
This is a bad idea. I think it would get shot down right away, but I think it would be that would be a good way to. I'm just saying that, like, we say that education's for critical thinking, but I don't really know if that's the case. I think I mentioned this before, that like liberal arts is probably the only way you can smuggle in critical thinking. And
yeah, it is. It's the humanities.
Right.
That's where you get the critical thinking.
And I remember I had teachers, and again, no offense to teachers, because I was a fucking terrible writer and still am, but I wrote an opinion that the teacher didn't like, and then therefore I had like a very low mark. And I was like, oh, okay, let me fluff this, let me BS this, and let me think about what you would like, and then I got a better mark. And then my writing was terrible, but I know what the teacher wanted. So what I learned wasn't critical thinking. It was more like, what does it...
Oh no, you learned critical thinking. You learned, you critically thought about it, and you learned that you have to kiss ass in order to succeed in the world. You learned a very valuable lesson.
It's like an education system built around the capitalist worker peasantry is not a good education system, but it definitely means you can follow the rules.
Wait. I think this teaches one thing, that if you kiss ass, you would be fine, but that's not critical thinking. That's like learning you have to kiss ass the hard way, right?
You can I think that can be critical thought. You gotta think about what you're writing, and you have to decide if your opinion, your actual opinion, is worth sharing.
No, it's more like
to get that across, or to get the better grade, because ultimately your opinion doesn't matter, and only the teacher's does.
This is more like...
This is really valuable.
Okay, perhaps you're right. Perhaps the teacher did me a fair lesson here.
I mean, it wasn't the lesson you wanted, but it was a lesson.
It's the lesson I needed. And
yeah.
No, you didn't need it. It was just what was going to be beaten into you anyway. You just learned it early.
It was a lesson. It was a life lesson, not really a school lesson.
And that's the thing about games that I actually feel like isn't very good for critical thinking, right? It's about pattern recognition for the most part, and pattern recognition isn't critical thinking. So
that's true.
I think there was this article about Magnus Carlsen, who was like this big chess player that I used to watch YouTube videos about him when I do the dishes. And they were challenging him about like opening moves on the chessboard, and if he could remember that game. And he could almost every time, to the point where he said, "Oh, this one's the Harry Potter one," like that in that first Chamber of Secrets. Yeah. And I feel like, well, this is... I'm not saying that pattern recognition and remembering history is bad, but I don't know where games... This in the sense of chess, he's very good at playing chess. Obviously, he's like the world master, but and perhaps he's good at critical thinking, but I don't know if that's the point of video games. They're meant for relaxation, and they're meant to reward people.
Some of them are.
Some of them.
Yeah, that's a pretty blanket statement.
I was gonna say different games have different
there is a certain
purposes.
serotonin hit, absolutely, but part of this is more games now are a lot more complex in how they present with this entertainment aspect. And they're going beyond just entertainment, and there is a lot of thought and precision and expertise that goes into its development in how the game plays and why that is relevant to what is going on. This is getting into film analysis, which is what I didn't want. Because I wanted to break this down for, the young dumb kids, for them to learn this thing.
Our moms who are listening right now, the young dumb
Thanks, Mom.
kids.
Yeah.
But the issue I have,
Except for whoever binged it today, good on you.
Yeah.
it's probably a. Anyway, I was gonna say, I'm not sure video games are really that. Like, they are more complex, but they're at the same time, I often think that it's just a variation on a theme. Like, I
All stories are one story.
yeah, but okay, I'm just gonna say it. All shooters seem to be kind of singularity, kind of going to the same direction. MMORPGs are kind of been stale for the past 15 years, right? And so, like,
That's generous. I think just WoW was peak MMO. Then they've all been trying to chase that.
strategy games, like the ones that I prefer, they haven't made a new one in a decade, I feel like. Um, and these
Well, Crusader Kings 3 just came out.
And these games are not really about critical thinking as they are more about, like, again, pattern recognition and the complex game of rock, paper, scissors. So, and the thing that really burns me, even though it happened like a decade ago, is Mass Effect 3 ending, right? Where the whole
Wait, which one did you
I
get?
got the blue Gatorade version, I think. It didn't matter because I was so pissed off I just turned off the computer. I was like, this game is 99% good, and then just don't finish it. Like,
I think it's a real high
if
percentage.
you,
It's a solid like 70.
it was terrible at the end. And the
No, Phil, I'm gonna say one thing: elevators.
Star Child. Okay, so my problem here is that there's a programming limitation to most games, and even in indie ones that are more creative have a programming limitation. Like, creative thinking, perhaps they can like illustrate a new idea, but like, as far as, and maybe problem solving for some puzzle games, but usually, again, the creator has an idea for the solution, and Celesta comes to mind, right? As indie
Yeah.
games, like, the creator has,
I was thinking Braid.
but the creator has an idea for those, so you don't have to do it, but you might either cheese it or you might have to, bang your head against the wall until you can figure it out. And again, I just feel like it's a programming problem. I don't know if problem solving is critical thinking. I don't think that they're the same. You could be a great problem solver, which is what games try to do, right?
I do think that's a good skill to learn.
It's a good skill, but if the game is about either trying to expand someone's mind and to look at it from different perspectives, games should be able to do that in theory for the interactiveness, but they fail because they don't have the...
They are on rails.
They're on rails.
What about
Yeah.
Undertale?
I don't know. I've never played this or heard of it. Explain to me what it.
It is the narrative is bonkers, but it's very deep. But the game has multiple endings based on your playstyle, and they have extreme endings.
Yeah, but it's all. There are specific endings though. There you only can get a finite number of endings.
And Romeo and Juliet only ends one way.
Yeah, but that's you're not reading Romeo and Juliet for like decision making.
Then what the fuck are you reading Romeo and Juliet for?
I don't know.
I
The
don't
beautiful
know.
prose that have to be explained on the next page?
Romeo and Juliet was not my story. I did not care about any romance stories. Still
Hamlet,
don't.
I guess? Macbeth?
I think in
I
that
guess there are a
case, you're
few that
not-
get murdery.
Yeah, I was gonna say in that case you're more studying like human motivation, which you could do in a game as well. Like if you make choice A, that would make character.
So then, going back to Telltale, the Telltale games would be a fine educational piece. If you are on the story through rails, and you know that the player is going to hit these certain decisions at the end of, we'll say, chapters, and
Yeah,
then you
this-
can discuss the difference in the choices made.
Yeah, this sounds like not a tool for any other class. That seems like a comparing video game literature to other like that's what that would be. Is its
Why
own
couldn't you
class.
compare that, like the motivations to make those choices, whether or not you save the high school kid when you're running
Yeah, but that
from
would
the
be
zombies in the bell tower?
I feel like this would be its own subject, not this. In this case, it would not be a tool for other.
Well, you're still dealing with a situation of self-preservation, which happens a lot in literature. Why did the
Yeah.
jury in To Kill a Mockingbird vote him guilty, even though
But-
all of the evidence said he was innocent?
But then it would be, I don't know. I feel like this would be just like a subset. Like this would be its own extracurricular.
So it's a tool that
At-
can be used in these classes to
Yeah, but it wouldn't
further investigate these topics and themes.
Yeah, but it would be like in this case for this particular like these particular video game types would be it's like its own class. It would not be like Shakespearean literature unless you are comparing like and this would be its own class as well unless you are comparing contemporary video game storytelling to literature of like
So
Shakespearean.
human motivation would just be the
It would no, I mean like that would be
class?
like a discussion point, but like no, I'm talking about like if you're looking
So
at
why couldn't you teach?
storytelling.
Why couldn't you have To Kill a Mockingbird in the first month and then have Telltale's Walking Dead game as the second part? And then in those, you can compare and contrast human motivation through different literature.
You could do that.
You could do that if people respected video games.
Or if you'd consider that being like, well, if that's what you're teaching, like is you're teaching storytelling, not specifically like novel writing or video game writing, but just storytelling in general and like different mediums of storytelling. But then you might as well just throw in like a video or something too. Like you might as well do a bunch of different storytelling.
Did you guys go to a fancy school where all of your classes didn't have video days? Because my cheap ass school definitely had those for all classes.
We had video days on like substitute days, like when the teacher couldn't be
No,
there.
we had that with our actual teachers. Like I had a real shitty
Yeah,
school.
that sounded.
You know what? I feel like the best game to use for teaching skills and problem solving would be there's this really great game called I Am Bread. and the
And on that note,
no, and the point is turn yourself into toast, and you have to problem solve like this whole room. You're stuck in a room, and you have to make yourself into toast. And you get extra points for like jamming yourself or buttering yourself.
that is a real dark way at looking at suicide.
It's the best game I've ever seen.
Stardew's feeling jealous.
Stardew is the best game I've ever played.
Well,
I Am Bread is the best one I've ever seen. Or why? I can't even describe to you how terrible and great. It's such a struggle. Because you got like different, like you've got four corners of your bread self, right? To try and move yourself and sort of flap yourself across surfaces. And you become so gross and dirty because you end up on the floor half the time.
Kind of like at an orgy.
Anyway, I feel like we should all play I Am Bread and call it good.
Well, listeners and moms out there, if you feel that this was a really dumb topic or should be further investigated, we won't, please feel free to leave a comment. Maybe an email at whatever our email is. Please insert recording here.
Also make some toast. Seems like a good idea. I'm hungry.
No, gluten is bad. Humans aren't meant to eat that much grain.
Disagrees. Bread's the shit.
That is what it turns into. A very unhealthy giant shit.
I mean, every food does, so.
and if you want to be one of our moms, you please go to our Patreon account that can be located in our website at www.iiopodcast.fm. And we look.
Wait, www.iio.fm?
No, www.iio.
At this
FM.
point, with internet literacy, do we even have to have www anymore?
Just Google IIO
Podcast.
FM or whatever. Yeah, IIO podcast. You'll find us probably.
Thanks, Mom.
Maybe.
And on to our B topic of this. The internet's a weird place, right, guys?
I don't think it's going to take off.
I am bread. I am bread. All right. Thanks, Mom. Bye.
Thanks, Mom.